Milkweed, Chapter 23. Janina was screaming as I raced down the stairs to the courtyard in the street. She wanted to kick Himmler, and it took both her father and Uncle Shepsel to hold her back. I careened from person to person. Where's Himmler? Where's Himmler? And I followed, pointing fingers down one street and down another until I saw the cars coming. It was a parade of them. Huge cars, magnificent cars with the tops down. The cars had uniforms of their own. They were gray and silver and unsmiling and proud, those cars were, just like the men sitting in them. Peddlers' carts veered out of the way. Peddlers are people selling things on the streets. I was surprised that people were not pouring out of the buildings, mobbing the sidewalks to see the number 2 jackboot. A few people stood at the curb, hats in hand, looking down. By the way, side note, that was the law. If a German soldier walked by, a Jew had to stand still, put his head down, and take his hat off. A few people stood at the curb, hats in hands, looking down. Others kept walking along, eyes straight ahead. Such was a man whose sleeve I tugged. Hey, which one of them is Himmler? The man kept moving as if I wasn't there. Only the flops looked at the parade. They stood at attention with one arm out in the jackboot salute, as if reaching for something no one else could see. A corner of newspaper over a nearby body waved in the breeze. I began to panic and I grabbed at people. Which one is Himmler? Nobody would answer, and I trotted along with the cars, and I stared at the magnificent men in the cars. They stared straight ahead. On their jackboot hats, the great silver eagles spread their wings and seemed to glare at the people, daring them to do something wrong. Their wings were like angels' wings, except the eagle's wings were fully unfurled, flying. I began calling to men in the cars. Hey, are you Herr Himmler? Herr, Herr, is Mr. in German. Some of the men looked down at me. Nobody answered. I ran from car to car. Are you Herr Himmler? Are you Herr Himmler? I saw a man. It was the most magnificent jackboot I had ever seen. He was sitting in the back seat of the first car. That must be him. His ramrod attention was better than my own in the courtyard, and he was only sitting. Blonde hair curled from beneath his eagle-winged hat. His head looked as if it had been chiseled from stone. His jawbone was all the weapon he would ever need. Herr Himmler? I shouted, Herr Himmler! But this man did not move. But someone else did. It was the jackboot in the passenger side of the front seat. He turned his head slightly enough so that one of his eyes stared at me for a moment. The eye seemed too large, as it was magnified behind the thick, round lens of his eyeglasses. The only thing magnificent about this man was his uniform. I saw half of a little black mustache. It seemed to be dripping out of his nose. He had a scrawny neck. He had a head that seemed more dumpling than stone. Can this be Himmler? The number 2 jackboot? He couldn't be. He looked like Uncle Shepsel. And I knew how to prove it one way or the other. His boots. Surely on the feet of Himmler, master of all the Jews, would be the most magnificent boots of all. Maybe they went all the way up to his legs. Maybe they had their own silver eagles. The parade of cars was picking up speed, and I ran to keep up. Herr Sir, let me see your boots, Herr Sir. And suddenly I was on the ground. I had run smack into someone. And as I got to my feet, a club was swinging back and forth before my eyes. I heard a loud smacking kiss. There was an overpowering smell of mint. Beyond the swinging club, the parade rolled through an open gate in the wall, and it was gone. I knew who was on the other end of this club. I looked up. It was Bufo. Bufo was the worst flop of all. He was the only one I was really afraid of. We were all afraid of Bufo. Nobody knew how to explain for an existence like somebody like Bufo. It didn't seem that he could possibly be a Jew, but he wasn't a jackboot either. We boys decided to believe he was a Warsaw sausage maker. He looked like a pile of fat sausages. He hated Jews so much that he pretended to be one so that he could live in the ghetto. That's what we believed. And then he could become a flop and he could torment and torture Jews till his heart's content. But like all flops, Bufo was not allowed to carry a gun. But that made no difference to Bufo. He would not have shot anyone even if he could carry a gun. He carried only his club. It was said that he loved the sound of his club cracking open a skull just like a pumpkin. But this wasn't true. He hardly ever used his club. His real weapons were his hands. More than anything, he loved killing a Jew with his hands. And not just any Jews. Bufo went after Jewish children. If you were an adult Jew, Bufo would he would walk right past you. But he went out of his way to get children. Sometimes he left the streets and he waddled through the alleyways in the rubble, smacking his club on his thigh. Hunting, you might say. And when he spotted someone to go after, he would kiss his club. Fortunately, he was fat and he was slow. If he managed to catch you or trick you, he only used the club to stun you. And then he would jam it into his belt and he would waggle his fingers for the treat that was about to come. You see, Bufo, he always smelled like mint. Not from chewing gum or candy. No, he chewed mint leaves. He chewed them like some men chewed tobacco or chewed gum. There were always tiny flecks of green mint on his lips, and if you could see the green flecks, if you could smell that mint, you knew you were way too close to Bufo. In fact, that was how we came to say a child had been killed by Bufo. We said, yeah, he smelled the mint. His favorite way to kill you was to pull you face to face into his belly and just smother you there. And when this happened, the odor of mint hovered about the body until the wagon came to cart it away. I think Bufo hated me most of all because I was the only one who ever got close enough to smell the mint, and I lived to tell about it. Though he terrified me, I did pester him. I couldn't help myself. I called him Fat Man. I had no sense. If I had had sense, I would have known what all the other children knew, that the best defense against Bufo was to be invisible. Never let him see you. Me? Nope. If I saw Bufo waddling down the street, I would sneak up behind him and yell, Fat Man! And he would be fuming as he turned around, for he recognized my voice. I was his own personal gnat. And the club would already be swinging, and I would be already ducking out of the way. Your ears are hairy, Bufo! I would shout, and I would thumb my nose at him and scoot away into the crowd. And now, here he was looming above me, smiling and kissing his club. And that was giving me all the time I needed to get away, but I couldn't. He had my foot pinned to the ground with his boot. It was a scuffed, mud-caked, un-Jack-like boot. And I screamed in pain. He laughed, and the club clattered to the street. He wasn't going to use the club. He was going to drown me in his belly. His meaty hands gripped my shoulders. I was dizzy with the smell of mint. My nose sank into his belly, and suddenly I was loose. I had yanked myself out of the shoe he had pinned to the ground, and now I was running and I was bouncing off of people. And when it was safe to stop, I sat on the curb. I had foiled Bufo again. I was alive. I took the other shoe off and I threw it away. It was spring. When the cold weather came back, I'd just steal another pair. That night on the rug, I laughed as I told the other boys about my close call with Bufo. Yuri didn't laugh. He said, "Don't." "Don't what?" "Don't bait Bufo." "Why?" He smacked me hard 3 times. "Don't!" he repeated. The rest of the boys were silent. I turned away and whimpered myself to sleep. I never mentioned the man who could not have been Himmler. Chapter 24. Find the cow. Side note, the other character in this book, even though this is a work of fiction, a historical fiction, the other character that was real in the story is Dr. Korchak. And this is a picture of Dr. Korchak. Find the cow, Dr. Korchak had said. It was the only time Dr. Korchak was ever stern with me. Whenever I brought him food for the orphans from the other side of the wall, he received it happily and patted me on the head and said, "My little smuggler." And as I turned to go, he never failed to say, "Be careful." And then one day he added, "And find the cow." From then on, every time I saw him, "Be careful, find the cow." The cow had become something to believe in or not to believe in, kind of like angels and mothers and oranges. How could something as large as a cow live in the ghetto and not be seen? How could it survive? What would it eat? Rubble dust? And yet, so great was the cry for milk for children that the cow seemed to materialize from the very hunger of the people, until one could almost see the animal loping down the street. Of course, nobody really did see it. And the more we did not see it, the more we believed in it. Almost every day, somebody claimed to have heard a mysterious "Vrrr." Of course, the day soon came when Janina said she heard it. "No, you didn't," I said, just to be contrary. Janina was always making things up. "I did," she said. We were playing pick-up sticks, and she swept the sticks away. "You're being a baby," I said. "Well, you're being a poop," she said. Uncle Shepsel looked up from the book he was reading and he growled at Janina. "There's no cow!" Reading the new book he had found was all Uncle Shepsel did these days. When he reached the end of the book, he went back to the first page and he started again. He muttered under his breath as he read. It was a book about the Lutherans. He was teaching himself to be one. And then he would no longer be a Jew. And they would let him out of the ghetto. Side note, a Lutheran is a type of Christianity. And Uncle Shepsel believes that if he becomes a Christian, that the Germans will let him out of the ghetto. Mr. Milgram told him, "You cannot stop being a Jew." Uncle Shepsel said, "I've already stopped. I'm a Lutheran." And when Uncle Shepsel growled at Janina that there was no cow, I switched to her side. "Yes, there is," I said. "I heard it too." Until then, I had been uncertain, and from that moment on, I believed in the cow. I had done this before. It seemed I believed in whatever I heard myself say. A few days later, when Dr. Korchak first said, "Find the cow," my belief was confirmed. I could not find the cow. I looked all over, in courtyards and backyards and cellars and rubble, no cow and no moo. I can't find the cow, I complained to the boys one day. That's because there is no cow, stupid, said Enos. Big Heinrich bellowed. No cow! Kuba climbed up Big Heinrich and sat on one of his shoulders. I'll bet Big Heinrich is lying, he said. Kuba leaned down so that his face was upside down in front of Big Heinrich's. Big Heinrich, do you believe there's a cow? Big Heinrich swayed under the weight of Kuba. Yes. We all laughed because we knew his answer proved nothing. Big Heinrich was not only the biggest boy, but he was also the most agreeable. He said yes to everything. This was our signal to play the Big Heinrich game. Big Heinrich, do you believe you're the biggest, dumbest person in the whole wide world? Yes. Big Heinrich, do you believe you're a little itty-bitty baby? Yes. Big Heinrich, are we going to sleep in a castle tonight in big soft beds and eat chocolates? All the chocolates we want, and the jackboots will be our servants? Yes. Ask him if he believes in Bufo, said Enos, or Himmler. Big Heinrich, do you believe in Himmler? I butted in. I don't. I said, there is no Himmler. And I told them at last about the parade of magnificent cars and how I called and called Himmler's name, and the only one who turned was the chicken-looking man in the front seat, turning one eye to stare at me behind the eyeglass. That was Himmler, said Yuri. It can't be. He looks like my Uncle Shepsel. It is him, said Yuri. So, Himmler, the number 2 boss jackboot, master of all the Jews, not to mention the gypsies, was a one-eyed chicken? At that moment, I began losing all my respect for the jackboots. I no longer wanted to be one.